It's The Journey with drug and alcohol attorney Mark G. Astor.
Everybody, welcome back to another edition of The Journey Live. I guess it's Journey Live now, right? As opposed to just The Journey, it's The Journey Live. So you're going to be able to watch us on Facebook, on YouTube, on my website. And so I'm super excited to have a very special guest, Amy Effman. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to The Journey. Are you relaxed now?
I'm feeling good.
I know. I mean, this isn't quite, this is not like MTV and stuff. I mean, we're still small, but we're getting it. But I'm glad you're on. I mean, so I'll let you tell your story. But Amy she's a therapist here in town with an amazing background, does amazing work. She's been to school. She's been to school for so many years. She could have gone to law school 3 times over and still had time for a year off in between.
Thank you.
So I'm glad that you're here.
Yeah, thank you.
So
it's really nice to be here. I appreciate you having me. I guess I'll talk a little bit about myself.
I want you to tell us what you do, because I mean, I described you as a therapist, but you do so much more. So
I am a therapist. I am licensed in marriage and family therapy, and I work a lot as a postmodern systemic family therapist.
Well, what is a postmodern, if I can even pronounce it, systemic family therapist?
So basically, when I work with a client, an individual, I perceive them as more than just the one person sitting in front of me, but more of a representation of a larger system. And so a lot of the things that I do with clients is remain very curious in that I'm finding out about their family system and their system within their workplace, the system within their educational history. I'm seeking more information than one might be looking at who might practice different types of therapy. I'm less interested in problem-oriented dialogue and more interested in solution-driven dialogue. So the things that we have control over today are the things I like to kind of jump into and ask a lot of questions about with the intention of being able to make forward progress.
So let me ask you, and I'm going to interrupt you sometimes, and you can interrupt me too. This is
that's
a
great.
free-for-all.
Thank you.
But, so you and I met because I was talking to the clinical staff at a treatment center here in town. I know that you work with a bunch of treatment centers, or a couple of them anyway. So we'll talk about that. But the way that we connected is because we both sort of work in the substance use and mental health arena, for lack of a better word. So for the families that you work with, right, the individuals, is it under that umbrella of substance use and mental health?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So my specialty is substance abuse and co-occurring disorders. So typically people that show up with a substance abuse problem or substance dependence problem certainly have other areas of their life that are out of order, if you will. Many people present with perceived depression, perceived anxiety. They might have diagnoses labeled bipolar disorder, thought disorders, schizoaffective, schizophrenia. However, what I'm interested in is less of the label and the disorder and more about how we can perceive solutions and a productive life moving forward.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit in time because it's kind of an interesting story about, how you got into this, because I know your dad's a lawyer, so you would think, naturally, you would become a lawyer. And I know that you thought about it, but you came to your senses. You didn't become a lawyer.
That's right.
But so maybe, not that the legal profession is dysfunctional in any way, shape, or form.
Nah.
No, right?
They serve a great purpose.
So tell us how you got into all of this.
Yeah, so as a child, I read a book called A Child Called It and became extremely interested in advocating for abused children and neglected children. And as an 18, 19-year-old in undergrad at University of Florida, I became a guardian ad litem and started advocating for abused and neglected kids. And that to me was the end-all be-all. That's what I wanted to do with my profession. Didn't really know how to get there. And so in my mind, because I was always so impressed with my dad's work as a family divorce attorney, I thought I wanted to become an attorney and advocate for abused kids and probably put their parents away. Only to later learn in life that life doesn't work out as we plan. And so I fell into a different career path, which led me into some graduate work studying cross-cultural education and diversity, which really opened my eyes a little bit more and allowed me to kind of look at people, society, differently than I understood being raised in, the demographics that I grew up in.
So how long did you study? What did you study at UF?
Yeah, thank you. So I studied business and education at University of Florida with the intention of going to law school, again, to advocate for abused kids. That was my goal. Life did not work out that way for me. I ended up getting a graduate degree, like I mentioned, in cross-cultural education and diversity, with an intention of doing more later. So what I was going to do in the future from there, I didn't quite know yet, but my intentions were to go to law school after the graduate degree. And so once I had a chance to experience life a little bit more and get some years under my belt working, I recognized that what I wanted to do was really work with people, work with the people who are perceived as, in my mind, survivors, not victims, but less about putting people away in jail and more about working with the perceived patient, one might say, in my mind, survivor, the person interested or invested in change in their life for whatever reason.
All right, so you get out of UF, because I know there's a ton of schooling here.
Yeah,
so
there is. I get out of UF, I moved to San Diego, and I spent 7 or 8 years there.
Terrible place to live, by the way. I mean, the weather's horrendous, the people aren't friendly.
I loved San Diego. It was difficult getting me back, but
I know how that was. I lived in Southern California for a number of years. It's a beautiful place.
So I'm in California, and I'm studying this cross-cultural education and diversity, and life kind of takes its course and starts to happen for me. I create a life in San Diego, and then I find myself very curious about the addicted brain because of people that I had interacted with in my life in San Diego, and again, my curiosity with diverse populations. And so being that it was kind of presented in my life, I became extremely curious about the addicted brain and wanted to make a difference and help people get better. So with that, I chose to go to University of California at San Diego while I was working full-time, and I started studying addiction studies, and that was the beginning of something.
What were you working in industry too?
I was working, doing different work, selling IT training. So I was working with my education degree and working with IT professionals, primarily those that were that served in the military in San Diego and were interested in using a GI Bill to make a career change. They were coming to get trained in Microsoft and Cisco and CompTIA certifications, which was really out of my scope of practice, but I learned quickly how to sell training for IT professionals or those that wanted to make a career change. And that was kind of the start of that identity or that chapter of my life in California up until the point I had been introduced to those who suffer from this disorder or brain disease of substance abuse, and became extremely interested in learning why people do what they do who have this disease. And so I chose to start going back to school in the evening at UCSD in San Diego, and that was the start of something really awesome.
That's a full day, school at night. So how long were you back in school for?
I went back to school for many, many years. That was back in 2004. I think my journey in school ended many years later. And this was after the graduate work that started around 2002. So I had been going for quite some time for graduate studies, and again, in different areas. So there was the diversity and cross-cultural education, which led me into the substance abuse counseling and addiction studies at UCSD. And later I started to pursue marriage and family therapy education on a higher level, both in San Diego and then eventually landed in Manhattan when I went to NYU for social work, and then returned to Florida to study at Nova Southeastern and finish my MFT degree.
Okay, that's it. That's all the. How many years is that? Like 12?
It was many years, yeah. Yeah, so definitely took the long road.
That's okay.
But picked up a lot of life experience throughout the journey. And because of that, I really feel competent and confident in the work that I can provide to others to assist them on their journey.
All right, I want to ask you a question here.
Sure.
And I need your input. So the conversation I have with parents, because we take calls from literally mums and dads all over the country, and sometimes the frustration for a parent is like, why, like, how did it start? Why won't they stop? Why can't they stop? Why won't they go to treatment? Why won't they stay in treatment? And you talk about it, you say it's a brain disease, and that's what we, within the industry, we sort of talk about it.
Sure.
So maybe help us to understand the dynamics of that, because if you're somebody who's sort of outside and you've never had this issue, right? Objectively, you say, well, why would you even start?
Sure.
So there's obviously something going on, and maybe help us to understand the dynamics. How does that all work?
Thank you for asking. So I find often that the family is typically in defense mode. They feel as though society, family, friends are pointing fingers at them for child or loved one or spouse's problem.
There's almost like a feeling of guilt amongst the parents.
Feeling of
they
guilt,
did something wrong, or
shame,
or something they didn't do.
Correct. Did I do something wrong? Is there something I could have done better? Should I have sent them to better schools? Was it better? Did they need better friends?
I've had parents say to me, was it that prescription medication I took when way back when that and I was pregnant or whatever?
Yes, it's typically not one isolated reason. And so for families, it's kind of nice to allow them to know that they're not at fault. There's not one primary reason or one person that caused one's addiction or substance dependence problem. It's a very poor coping skill for other problems that exist in one's life. So we can't just pinpoint one specific thing. When families want to get involved and have a lot of questions, again, it's less, in my mind, it's less problem-oriented conversation, more about let's get to the solution. And so assuming they want to be supportive, that's the first step in being part of the solution. So I have found that when families are a part of the solution, the client, loved one, patient, whatever we choose to call them, recovering addict or alcoholic, will become better. I find more frequently than someone whose family is completely isolated from their problem and cut them off.
Right, but what's going on up here with the person who's having these issues?
Sure. So a variety of things could be going on up there. That's why it's so significant when a addict or alcoholic arrives in a treatment center or with a professional that studies what I do. They do a very extensive diagnostic evaluation with an intention to get to the core issues, right? So as a clinician who meets with people who are either in recovery or attempting to be in recovery or family members that are in recovery, what we're trying to find out is what are the specific areas in one's life that have gone astray? What are the areas that need help? What are the areas that they want to build upon? And so frequently, because of one's alcoholic and addict behaviors, they have burnt bridges in majority of the areas of their life. So they have probably had some legal run-ins. They have probably had a lot of family and relationship problems, lying, manipulation, stealing. We see a lot of like check fraud, and we see a lot of stealing from family members and selling or pawning their possessions, their jewelry, their wedding rings. We see a lot of the same symptomology that is very common for someone like me to hear about, but extremely foreign for a family that's not familiar with this level of insanity.
Yeah, so we tend to, most of the time, 9 times out of 10, there's always some kind of substance use and mental health going on, and sometimes it's chicken and egg, which comes primary, what came first. And I just thinking about it as we're talking, there's sort of two kinds of cases that I typically see. There's the kind of case where there's been trauma. Could have been a sexual. So I've had kids who had car accidents, got addicted to pain pills, some type of trauma in their life, and they're now either they became addicted to pain pills, or I've had mums tell me that their daughters were sexually assaulted, and now they started to self-medicate to deal with the pain. So you've got those kinds of cases,
sure.
And then you've got the kinds of cases where, and this is how it was sort of described to me, where you get somebody who has low dopamine. Okay. And so they start to smoke weed in school, right, or in college, and because they feel that makes them feel better. So it seems like there's those two kinds of cases. So from a clinical perspective, and how are those different? Because somebody who says, well, I just feel better, and maybe they haven't suffered any trauma, they just feel better because they smoke weed or whatever it is, whatever their drug of choice is. How's that different, say, from somebody who has suffered a trauma and now they're self-medicating to almost numb the pain?
Sure. So typically once I'm seeing people who have addiction or substance dependence, they're in a position where they're either numbing the pain or using substances in an effort to feel quote-unquote normal. Especially with the opiate epidemic, we see a lot of people who might have started socially or recreationally or with a boyfriend, girlfriend, and then they have to eventually use substances, whether it's pain pills, prescription pain pills, or perhaps they have run out of money, they've run out of connections to get pills, and then they transition to heroin. Regardless of the poison of choice, what's going on inside is that the body and the mind will become dependent on whatever that substance is. And so if they try to get off of that substance because they do not want to be impaired moving forward, they have a very difficult time, in my experience, getting off of that substance. And once it's a physiological dependence, the body is going to react very difficult to one who's getting off of the substance kind of cold turkey, or even if they're trying to titrate down, it's more than just that. So the dependence the abuse might begin as doing this socially or recreationally. You mentioned a kid who's in school who might be smoking marijuana occasionally, then it becomes socially, and maybe they become a more consistent user. Over time, what will happen is they will either develop a dependence, or they will kind of back off of that substance. And once you've developed a dependence, you need a higher level of care to get off of the substance, regardless of what the substance is.
Okay, so what you're saying is it seems like it doesn't really matter how you sort of got there. Once you're there in that sort of dependence
category.
Thank you. Sure. That's what I was looking for. The dependence category, from a dependence issue, physiological perspective, it's somewhat similar, right? I mean,
Very
you're dependent,
similar.
you're dependent, right? I mean, maybe the treatment in terms of dealing with the trauma, because obviously if someone's suffered trauma, if that's not addressed, they're just going to keep using. But the whole dependency issue seems like once they're dependent, they're dependent, which is why, when we look at it, a parent looks at it and says, "Why can't my kid stop?" I mean, it's like, well, it's kind of like telling someone to stop breathing or stop eating.
It becomes out of their control.
Right. Okay. So that's what it is. It's an out of control situation.
It's
basically.
an out of control situation based on many different factors. So the brain chemistry changes significantly. We see things like more excessive depression, higher levels of anxiety. When someone pulls off of substances, if they start to have post-acute withdrawal symptoms, we sometimes see psychosis and psychotic behaviors, manic behaviors, depressive behaviors, self-harm, cutting. So there are a lot of things that can take place as someone's brain chemistry is going from dependent on something that may or may not be working for them, then pulling away from it because it's affecting other areas of their life. That's why we have medical detox programs and residential treatment programs that assist clients as they're going through literally a brain disease to come off of the poison and to kind of get back into the swing of things while being assessed on a consistent basis by medical professionals, mental health professionals, etc.
Well, it's crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's wild.
It's crazy stuff. All right, let's. The other thing that I've heard we talk about in our industry is sort of the whole idea that it's a family disease, right?
Yes.
And so sometimes I almost feel like a clinician, a little bit, because when families call us, right? My dad, when he was alive, didn't realize how much I learned from him until he left us. But one of the things the words of wisdom that he imparted on me, and I'm sure your father can appreciate this, is that he hated all the lawyers, right? He said, "I hate all the lawyers except for you." And the truth is, I don't know if everybody hates all the lawyers, but
I hope not.
I hope not, right? But people don't typically want to call us and say, absolutely need a lawyer, right? So at least when they call us, it's because they absolutely need either a Marchman Act or a guardianship or some type of legal intervention. And what I notice is the sort of the trauma, the effect that it's had on the family.
Sure.
So maybe,
Big time.
Yeah, big time, right? Especially if they're, their child, I use that word generically because I'm 52 and my mother still thinks I'm a little boy, but maybe I am in some ways. But, this to them is their child, whether it's an 18-year-old or a 25-year-old.
Yes.
So maybe explain to us the sort of dynamics and how this affects the family.
So I can certainly speak on that. So the family members that are loved ones or people who adore and care about the person who is sick become equally as sick. They are sick in a different way. They are not necessarily dependent on a poison that's affecting their mind and body and soul, but instead they're actively concerned, nervous, anxious, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week about their loved one, the possibility of them overdosing, dying, going missing. So there's constantly this degree of worry and anxiety. And frequently what we find with the family members is they actually take on a lot of side effects of the constant worry and anxiety. We see blood pressure go up. We see cholesterol issues. We see people have heart attacks and strokes who are family members of addicts and alcoholics. It is so important that the family get the necessary professional help just as well as the identified patient or the client, because they are suffering a tremendous loss. And throughout the journey of that experience, they're also taking on a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry, and it affects all areas of their life, much like it would the addict. They're going to be affected at work. They're going to call out of work. They're going to refinance their house. They're going to start selling their jewelry, their possessions. They're going to start giving all of their attention to the sick identified client, if you will, or the addict or alcoholic who's active in their use, the siblings or the in the spousal unit, the husband or wife might lose a lot of the attention from the person who's most concerned or most worried. And so then we hear buzzwords like codependent, the codependent mom, the codependent spouse. He or she is sicker than their loved one. We have to be very careful when we throw these words around. So typically family members that care a lot about their loved one might take on some of these labels. And the reason why that's happening is because people in the family or who care about the sick person do not know how to care or love them properly. They believe that they want to save them. And so what we've learned with addicts and alcoholics is that they really need to be in a position where they're, I don't want to say ready to be saved, if you will, but ready to get treatment and ready to get help. And sometimes that will require the family taking on a role that they do not like, which might look like a family member contacting an attorney, going to the police, calling the police, having them arrested.
So, that brings up, another sort of interesting issues, because sometimes, when I speak to the parents, because it's a family decision, right? Even if the parents are separated or divorced, and that happens pretty regularly. As a lawyer, I kind of got to get them both on the same page. Mm-hmm. And so, let's say mum calls me, and she says, Dad and I are divorced, blah, blah, blah. I will normally, before I'll even say, yeah, I can help you or I can't help you, I'll say, look, okay, if Dad is involved in the decision, let's schedule a time for us all to chat, because it's a family decision.
Definitely.
And then we can figure out, and I can figure out if I can help you. And if I don't think I can, I'll just tell you. And if I can, then we can talk about whether or not you actually want to do this.
Sure.
So that you get that dichotomy, and sometimes Dad wants tough love. I'm not giving him any money, kick him out of the house. And Mum is like, no, I don't want to, if we kick him out of the house, then I don't know where he is. And so, Dad thinks Mum's an enabler. So I see that a lot. And then, along with the sort of guilt about whether or not one of the parents caused it, is the fact Mum feels bad about, and I don't mean it's just Mum, but it could be Dad too. It could be one of the parents feels bad about the fact that they feel like we are forcing our child to do this. We're forcing our child to go to treatment. So maybe help me to understand some of this stuff, because I don't have your background.
So I think there's a misconception about what treatment really offers someone. Treatment is a great thing. Treatment's a great place. Treatment gives people an opportunity to regain their life and to really connect with other great people who've made some really bad decisions in their life. A lot of people that come into treatment have an abundance of shame and guilt. They have suicidal ideations. They're in a bad place in their life for the most part. And so family members may or may not understand enough about what treatment offers somebody, which is a safe place to get better for the most part in an ideal situation. And so I think there's an abundance of guilt about forcing a loved one into treatment, but the family members really need to kind of check themselves and think, if something, God forbid, were to happen to my son, daughter, spouse, parent, would I be okay knowing that I've done every single thing in my power to make sure that they got help? So I find family members sometimes when speaking of the Marchman Act or putting someone in a treatment center that might be more of a lengthy stay or an extended stay treatment center, being uncomfortable about this decision. Will my son or daughter be angry at me? Will my spouse be upset? Can I trust what they're going to do with this? At the end of the day, it's better for your son, daughter to be angry than for them to be overdosed and dead, or in a DUI situation where they've killed somebody. Nobody expects an overdose. Nobody plans for an overdose. Even addicts and alcoholics, when they're sitting around in a circle and they talk about having no fear of death, nobody plans to be in that situation. So I think when it comes to a family meeting, again, taking a solution-driven kind of stance, which is we care about our son or daughter or spouse so much, or parent, that we are willing to do anything in our power. So really, when people do interventions, the word intervention or Marchman Act gives people this kind of like negative taste in their mouth. It's really an intervention of love. I care so much about my loved one that I don't want to see them die from this disease. And if it goes untreated, it is very likely that this disease can kill somebody.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, most of probably 9 times out of 10, when we Marchman Act somebody, we're able to get somebody clean. Every once in a while, you'll get a kid who is just so resistant you know, that miracle is not going to happen right there and then.
Sure.
And they may or may not at some point in time get back in treatment, and they may or may not at some time overdose.
So family members and the legal system only has so much power, just like a therapist. We only have so much power, nor do we want too much power. Our intention, I believe, as a system, this is a perfect example of the systemic therapy, is that the legal system and a Marchman Act and a family and a therapist and a treatment center are all working together, if you will, to plant seeds. We cannot make the plant grow. So that person has to be responsible for watering the plant, making sure the plant gets sun. They have to, typically a lot of the programs here believe in a 12-step program. It's significant for clients to connect. There's a community that is available to them. There are sponsors. There are post-traumatic stress disorder therapists. There are eating disorder therapists. So there are specific people for various types of problems, and it's important that you get a team together that works really well with whatever the client is showing up with at that time.
Yeah, when we do the Marchman Act, especially, because it's a 2-step process with a period of assessment and a period of treatment. I like that period of assessment, and I'll tell you why. Because if you get somebody who's in a receiving facility, say, between 5 and 10 days, 7 times, maybe even 8 times out of 10, by the time I get them into treatment, where they haven't been using, they're thinking a little clearer, they've detoxed, they tend to sort of understand they need help. And most of the time, I don't have to have a contested hearing. So part of me feels like if you can get somebody clean for a very brief period of time, the rational brain takes over from the subconscious mind, which loves the status quo.
Sure.
And we can get them in. Not in every case, but in most cases.
So I think that's an ideal situation, if you will.
It is, and most of the time that happens. But every once in a while, you get a kid who says, look, they're like, I'm not using, I ain't doing it, throw me in jail, I don't care. And, I had one of those hearings last week, and the mother was just devastated.
That is
devastated because she felt like the kid was spitting in her face. And I felt frustrated too because I couldn't do what I needed to do to get this kid into treatment. And it's,
So something about addiction we know with certainty is that the consequences continuously get worse and worse. So assuming that adult child is being encouraged by the legal system, you or the family to go in for a Marchman Act, to go to treatment, to get help, and have the Marchman Act, in time, I would like to believe that they understand why it did exist. It's the only reason a family member does a Marchman Act, in my opinion, is because they care about them so much they don't want them to die, and they're fearful that if the court system does not get involved, if they don't do anything, that reality could become the end. So in my experience, maybe once or twice, I've seen a Marchman Act where, the client fought it the entire stay that they were in treatment and was just unwilling to see how the family cared about them. Sometimes they see it as like a punishment for past actions. But realistically, if you're stealing your parents' car and you're pawning their jewelry and you are completely out of control and you have now developed hepatitis C because of dirty needles and you're prostituting, there's a reason why these things exist. It's a harm reduction factor, if you will, if nothing else.
Wow. So where do you think all this comes from? Because, I get a lot of calls from, especially the younger kids, where they're smoking marijuana. And one thing that I see is consistent is just paranoia, delusional. They think the FBI or the CIA is spying on them. They think their parents are tapping their phones. All crazy stuff. I mean, I remember when I was a kid growing up and I had friends that smoked marijuana. It didn't seem to have, one or two of them actually ended up falling off the wagon permanently, but it didn't seem like it had that kind of an impact. So I'm seeing a lot of that. I'm also seeing kids who are addicted to all kinds of medications,
Sure.
The ADD, ADHD type medications. And again, I'm not saying there isn't a place for some time for plain meds and other type meds, but I see a lot of medications being prescribed at an early age and a lot of smoking and marijuana at an early age. And that, to me, is the beginning of the slippery slope.
Sure.
So, from a clinician's perspective, how is that all happening? We just getting better at spotting it, or are we just creating a whole generation of kids who are really having serious issues?
Yeah, I can say from working with younger adults and sometimes adolescents and kids in my practice, you do see people being diagnosed earlier on and getting medication that might not be habit forming initially, specifically things that people take maybe for attention deficit disorder or ADHD, they take early on that are kind of like a stimulant effect. Whether or not they necessarily need it is out of my scope of practice, so that would be on a psychiatrist's assessment or evaluation. But what happens is people who've been taking medications to depend on certain things for many, many years or a lifetime or their entire childhood, I can see sometimes picking up stimulants or other medications or drugs later on in life. So I do see that pattern that exists sometimes. We also see often in treatment centers when people have had really chronic back pain or have had different conditions that require some pain medication initially.
The oxys.
Sometimes the oxys, all sorts of different things. Maybe even a dental surgery, and they end up really liking the way they feel on the medication. But what we do know is that there are people that have real chronic pain, and there are ways of dealing with that in a holistic manner where they're not habit-forming medications. Me personally, I believe strongly in an abstinence program. So there are different types of theories and ways of going about recovery and getting clean and sober. The programs I've seen work best have been abstinence-based. Typically, there are medications that assist people in getting clean and sober, but it's not a long-term solution. With the exception of like antidepressants, antipsychotics, and mood stabilizers, these medications can assist someone who are coming off of all sorts of street drugs, and they're trying to normalize or stabilize their brain and their brain chemistry.
So I got a question. Where do you think this all goes? I mean, we've got a sober homes task force here in Palm Beach County. We've been cleaning up the industry, and
they're doing a great job.
Yeah, they are. In fact, I actually was to me, it's almost like, we used to sort of joke about how we were, come to Florida, get well, sit on the beach, and get clean, right? And then we had all these people who were taking advantage of the situation, and the task force came along, cleaned up the industry, arrested people who were cheating. The rest of them went out of business, and then you sort of left with a core group of treatment centers. And to me, Florida's now become a more attractive place to come because
I would like to think that
we have, we now have, this sort of, for lack of a better, regulatory body law enforcement body, the task force, who's overlooking everything. And so what it's left with is a core group of treatment centers, like some of the ones you work with, that are really trying to do good work.
Yeah, so we have a lot of top-notch treatment centers in South Florida, and I get a little bit frustrated hearing about all of the negativity that's happening in Palm Beach County and Broward County with the treatment centers, because there are a lot of fantastic clinicians that work here and believe heavily and strongly in the work that we do, and we see people get better. So with the reputation of South Florida taking kind of a plunge because of the people that were doing kind of shady activity and hopefully now are paying the consequences for their shady activity, that is not the majority of the treatment and recovery that happens in South Florida. There are plenty of fantastic individuals that dedicate their life and all of their energy to helping people get clean and sober. And, I've consulted with many treatment centers and worked at various treatment centers full-time in different capacities. And really, I've seen some fantastic healing going on in all areas, really. And if I were to see something that looked shady or appeared shady, I would have no trouble reporting that. And I think that's something that someone who holds good morals and ethics in the industry would be willing to do if they saw something that was going the wrong way, that would negatively affect a client or a patient, that they would speak up about it, and that's really an obligation that licensed clinicians have. Really anybody, not to minimize what other people do in the industry. We have a lot of behavioral health technicians that have hands-on, experiences with clients every day, and they make such a difference in the clients' lives. So it's important that everybody work together to have the same kind of mission statement or the same purpose, which is overall healing and for people to get better. That's why we're doing this. This is not a way to get rich fast, nor kind of a way to manipulate or fool people into billing insurance and stuff like that. That's not the style of healing that anybody is interested in.
So where do you see this all going? I mean, I've heard Heather Hayes talk about the fact we're in a national epidemic, and it certainly seems like it's not just South Florida. I mean, they talk about parts of Virginia and Ohio and the Midwest that are just, they don't have access to the treatment centers that we have. You got whole towns where almost every kid is addicted to something. So, where does this go? So
what I see happening often is in these treatment centers that I work for in South Florida in the area, I don't know if the right word is recruit or attract many clients from all over the country now. And I'm seeing a lot more exposure from Minnesota, from New Mexico, from California, from different areas of the country. Whereas 5 to 10 years ago in the past, when I was working at treatment centers, it was primarily New Jersey and Philadelphia, New York that were represented. I'm seeing that there are a lot of professionals throughout the country that are attracting people to come to South Florida to get clean and sober. And what I'm learning is equally important as the treatment that they get for the 30, 60, 90 days, hopefully 6 months or a longer stay, is the aftercare plan and what happens after they get out of their initial chapter or their first phase of recovery. Because recovery is a lifelong process. It doesn't just happen over 30, 60, 90 days. That is just getting, your feet wet, if you will.
It's the beginning.
It's the beginning of a lifelong, journey and lifestyle. So to answer your question, I think a very solid aftercare plan is necessary, which looks like maybe a sober living environment, maybe a sober coach, maybe a life coach, ongoing therapy, individual therapy, family therapy. We can't kind of let that fall by the wayside. Sponsorship, continuous meetings. A lot of people make a commitment to attend 90 and 90, they call it, 90 meetings in 90 days. It's awesome to see the fellowship of AA and NA and CA. There's a whole network of people that are available to those who have this condition, and it's a perfect resource for employment opportunities and friendship opportunities and ability to raise one's self-confidence, abilities to connect with other people that have similar situations, and to really always remain focused on what the commonalities are, not to pay attention to the differences. Because in these 12-step meetings, we have people who are right off the streets. They might be homeless for the past day, but at that moment, they are actively willing and motivated to get clean and sober and put down alcohol and drugs for that day and to make a difference that day. So this is an unbelievably welcoming fellowship. They don't care about your demographics. They don't care where you come from, what you've studied, who you are, what you're wearing. Nobody cares. They just want you to be motivated to get clean and sober and to be there for your fellow alcoholics or addicts in recovery. And it's really just an awesome program that's available to people. And in the South Florida area, another really big benefit of being in this area is that there are meetings all over town, all hours of the day. If you work till 9 o'clock at night, there's a 10 o'clock meeting. If you work at 8 o'clock in the morning, there's 6 a.m. meetings. There are constantly meetings available to you. They don't charge anything. They won't even allow sponsorship. It's not about money. It's about getting better and people being there for one another. And I've found that in this area, we have plenty of different meeting options. The other thing I'd like to just touch on is that they offer Al-Anon meetings for family members and loved ones of people who've been affected by this disease. And so
there'll be a meeting for the families to go to.
Meeting for the families. There's a Family Anonymous meeting. There's an Al-Anon meeting. There's Codependent Anonymous meetings. There's a variety of meetings for everybody. There's Sex and Loved Addicts Anonymous. There are all sorts of anonymous meetings. And so the idea is that you can go and connect with like-minded people and build upon the skills that you've hopefully received in treatment and continue to develop purpose, connection, a sense of spirituality and calmness, and really a love and zest for life through the steps and the foundations of the 12-step program.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you talked about that because, it's interesting. I had, several months ago, we had John Hulick in here. I don't know if you know John. He's the Palm Beach County drug czar now. Worked for many years for Governor Christie. And, we had that conversation. I said, it had been my opinion that until we made treatment available to everybody, that we were going to, this epidemic was going to continue to get worse. And I do think that's important. But one of the things that he talked about was the fact that, we want to get everybody into treatment, but what happens afterwards?
Sure.
We have to have, the support, the AA. They need access to employment. They need a place to live. They need a sponsor. I mean, they need all the support system because otherwise they're almost set up for failure.
Yes.
And I didn't really think about it, but that, made me realize, look, what I do is great, right? Treatment is great, but it's really just the beginning of the journey.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I really, it helped me to understand a bit more about what I was doing because when I'm talking to parents, I explain to them, because they come and they almost feel like treatment is a miracle or the Marshman Act is a miracle.
Yeah, it doesn't.
And it really isn't. It really isn't. It's
a piece of the miracle.
Yeah, it's sort of the bit that gets things moving in that direction. But I mean, if somebody goes to treatment for 90 days or, in our case, we normally get them for 6 months. For 6 months, if after 6 months they do nothing and just go back to their old friends, their old environment, well, yeah, I mean, the chances of staying in recovery are, I would say, very slim. So I think what you talked about, I mean, it's huge. It's the
aftercare piece
is so big. I mean, it's everything. Mm-hmm. It really is.
Yeah.
It's everything. So I want to know. So when you have your own private practice, right?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, and I want you to give out all your contact information before we get going.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And so, how many other treatment centers do you work with when you're not working in your own practice?
I typically am consulting for 1 or 2 facilities at any time. But what I like to do is get involved with facilities and sometimes assist in building a family program or offering groups that maybe other people don't do. A lot of my work is solution-focused therapy and narrative therapy. So those that are licensed as marriage and family therapists would have been exposed to my style of training. But there are different licensed clinicians that come into the treatment centers, licensed mental health counselors, licensed clinical social workers. We have psychologists, both with PsyDs and PhDs. So it's really neat that everybody kind of brings their expertise from different styles of training and different styles of learning. We also have a lot of certified addictions professionals and addictions counselors that come with a different skill set. So what's really nice about these treatment centers is you get an abundance of professionals that work in the field or people that are in recovery themselves or both. And everybody works together as a team and collaborates in their own style, benefiting the clients. Because it's fair to say that any one person is not going to love, my style or me as a therapist as much as they might like the variety of 4 or 5 different ways of understanding the same message. So I think I answered your question. I'm not sure if I did.
So I want to also, with all this stuff going on, what do you do to keep yourself
Oh, great question. Personally, I enjoy self-care. So what my latest thing has been is this extend bar kind of Pilates ballet class. That's what I find to be kind of a release of any energy that I'm carrying with me. It took many, many years to kind of master self-care and not bringing your work home with you. So throughout the hours in session and the groups that I facilitate, we hear a lot of very, very intense, sensitive information about people's lives. And as much as we want to be empathetic and be present to them and be available to people, we can only do that when we take care of ourselves. So I have kind of dabbled with the Al-Anon program, the Codependence Anonymous program, also physical health. I like working out, specifically extend bar and dance. Certainly hanging out with my friends and going to the beach. And I'm a very big family person, so I like to stay connected and constantly thinking of new people I can connect with and collaborate with to offer and create something that doesn't yet exist for the people that I serve and work with. So
I love it.
Yeah, thank you.
So for the mums and dads who are going to watch this show, how do they get a hold of you? How do they get in contact with you?
Thank you so much for asking. So my name is Amy Effman. My last name is Effman, and my practice is in Southeast Boca in Royal Palm Place. To get in touch with me, my phone number and email.
Yeah, give it all out. Email,
awesome.
The whole
Thank
bit,
you.
Website.
You can call me at any time. My phone number is 561-699-8896. And my email address would be amy@mytherapistamy.com. It's AMY@mytherapistamy.com. And the website's the same, www.mytherapistamy.com. I'm available day, night. I work weekends. This is really my life. So I make myself available as you would need to speak with me. And I really appreciate you having me on the show.
I'm glad you came on. I know you were nervous.
Thank you so much.
I hope I didn't. Was this easy, right? It's not.
Yeah, this was fine. I'm very passionate about the work I do.
I love it, though. That's why I wanted you on. You're so passionate about what you do.
Thank you. I just want to make sure it's delivered in the way that I feel it.
I think you did a good job.
Thank you so much.
You did. All right, so I'm going to give out our information. So you can watch us on Facebook at the Drug and Alcohol Attorneys Facebook page, the Mark G. Astor personal page. There will be announcements on Instagram, on Twitter. You can actually see this show and some of the older shows on the drugandalcoholattorneys.com website. If you want information about the Marchman Act or guardianship, or just want to get a hold of Amy, and I wouldn't blame you if you just wanted to get a hold of Amy, you can call me at 561-419-6095, or you can email me, mark@drugandalcoholattorneys.com. All right. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you so much. Thank you
for having me on the show, having you on my show.
Thank you.
She got me all verklempt. This is what happens. I had this problem with Jennifer as well a couple of months ago.
Thank you.
Thank you.